Hi, Tom Cole, the coach for Steve Taylor, Community Star, and I've got the boss here, Steve Taylor, and we have a wonderful young lady who is extremely talented author, Julie Rubini. Julie, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
I think this gallery up here, and I could be wrong, but I think this gallery up here are all books you have written, is that correct?
Absolutely, as well as edited.
Does that give you I mean, Steve and I got one out of each one of us got one,
Yeah.
And Cross is working on one. Does that give you a sense of accomplishment and work ethic? Because we have some idea what goes into a book, and you've got a whole cavalcade of books up here. Does that make you feel good?
It does. Actually, I can't say that I've ever sat from this vantage point and looked at them and had them on display.
Yeah.
But all the same, I'm very humbled by the number of children's book authors and illustrators that are even so much more prolific. I am amazed at their work ethic, at their dedication. I've always tried to maintain a balance between all that I do and participate in. So yes, I am very proud of this. And as every author, as you know, there's always just one more book. And after you're done with that book, then there's just another book. So,
but you've been so successful, and I truly believe that everybody has a book in them. But I think the problem when you talk to people about books is getting started. How do I do it? Do you have a Rubini tip to, for somebody? I know I hear the things of have a schedule. You get up at 8 in the morning, you have your iced tea or coffee, and you write. You have a schedule. I've heard people say that. Is there a Rubini tip something that you did that would help other people to be writers?
Derriere and chair. It's a catchphrase. Yes,
Derriere and chair. I kind of like that.
Well, and I think as my work up to this point is nonfiction. So I love to research, and what I've done through each of the biographies is to just immerse myself in that individual's life and history, and to find, when I do school visits, I talk about the importance of primary resources. We were talking about it earlier, about journals, about letters, about interviews with either the subject or those who know the subject, and how significant, how important that is to reflect that in your work. So I dig in and I research. In the case of my very first book for Ohio University Press was Millie Benson. You ask people, Millie Benson, do you know Millie Benson?
Yeah, you have to tell.
In Toledo, people might know Millie Benson, but then anywhere else they're like, no. And then you say Nancy Drew, and they say, and it's like, yes, she was the original Nancy Drew ghostwriter. So
which was really the Hardy Boys, only on the female side.
Oh, absolutely.
Nancy Drew was so cool.
I tell you what, it's really cool. So Edward Stratemeyer created Nancy Drew series and created Hardy Boys and the Bobbsey twins. He had a business called the Stratemeyer Syndicate, which sounds like kind of like a literary mafia or something, but it was literally Edward and his assistant, and he had Millie, long story short, she grew up in Iowa. She always wanted to be a writer. Her father was a doctor, and he encouraged her. He said, as long as you can find a way to make a living at it. And so she went to the University of Iowa. She graduated. She really wanted to write novels. She reached out she saw an ad that Edward Stratemeyer had posted in an industry newspaper. He wasn't ready for her. She wasn't ready for him at that point. So she ended up going back to school, became the first person, male or female, to receive journalism or Masters of Journalism at the University of Iowa. This is back in late 1920s, right? Wow. So, and again, very traditional roles for women, for a woman to become an author. Millie was everything but traditional. I mean, she was truly Nancy Drew personified. There's a great picture in the book of Millie diving into the Iowa River, which I think is just a perfect reflection of who she was. So she ended up, after her master's, she reconnected with Edward Stratemeyer, and he had her writing for a Ruth Fielding series, one of the series he created, and then he needed a writer for this new, spunky 16-year-old sleuth, and I reached out to Millie, and there was history. She wrote quite a few of the original Nancy Drews, and then went on to publish over 130 children's books, and all the while worked at the Plate for some 50 years, right? So all of that, I thought I need to know her story. So I need to not only go to Iowa, the University of Iowa at that time was just beginning a great archives. They have an incredible online archive now available. And then went to her family home, met with her niece, a great niece, interviewed them. And then Edward Stratemeyer, all of his work is in the New York Public Library Manuscript Rare Books Division. Such a cool experience. You have to apply to go into this room.
Oh, wow.
So it's like you can't just walk in, you have to apply, fill out you know, why you were there, who you were researching, what boxes. I mean, there's literally hundreds of boxes of materials for the Stratemeyer Syndicate.
You know these people so well, Julie. Do you have a feeling like when you're writing this, they're with you? I mean, do you have that almost like a ghost-like, they're with you, right?
Yes, and seeing interviews of Millie, WGTE was great. They had the 30-minute great story on Millie Benson, and they gave me outtakes, which Millie was not one to express or show emotion very often publicly, but there was an outtake where she was asked about, I believe, the loss of her. She lost both of her husbands, and you could see her vulnerability just for a moment, and it touched my heart. I thought, there's you know, she comes across, she was one tough bird, but she lived life and she experienced loss, and she, for me, was an inspiration through our journey to know that she just kept going. She just kept going.
You've got this great collection of books that you brought in that you've authored, and you talk about the research that you've done. Talk a little bit, we were talking off air about Virginia Hamilton and the research that you had to put in for these books here. Sounds like an amazing story too.
Well, and so Ohio University Press, again, they have this wonderful series called the Biographies for Young Readers. They're still publishing works for middle grade, young adult, so high school. And when I learned about this series serendipitously through an organization I've been a member of for a long while, it's called the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. SCBWI is the acronym. When someone comes to me and says, hey, I've always wanted to write a children's book, what recommendations do you have? And I say, become a member of that organization, because just like your industry organizations, you know, that is the industry organization for children's book writers and illustrators. So I was at attendance in the meeting, and this woman who now is a friend of mine, she was the editor for the series, and she mentioned that they were just beginning work on the series and looking for authors. And without even thinking about it, I said, oh, that sounds like something that I might enjoy doing. And I walked away from the conversation thinking, I've never done anything like that before. It was baptism. Millie was a baptism by fire. Virginia was my second book, so I kind of felt like I was validated through the response to Millie Benson's book, and so, but I also felt rather naive. I knew of Virginia Hamilton. I had read a number of her works through our work with Claire's Day. I knew of her family. I knew that she was born and raised in Yellow Springs, but I didn't really know her, and I really didn't know how significant she was in the world of children's literature. So when I submitted this nonfiction book proposal to Ohio University Press, and when it was accepted, and as I began and I went to Yellow Springs and I met with Arnold Adolph, her husband, who was just a dear, dear soul, and you know, dug into all the resources in Yellow Springs and interviewed people who knew Virginia, and went to Kent State. There is a celebration of multicultural works that was established when Virginia was alive at Kent State, and still a success now. So as you said, just kind of immersed myself, came to know Virginia through all of these individuals and through all of this research. And I just was absolutely in awe and blown away about even still how honored and remembered she is. And so for me, I received, you know, there's various review sites that a publisher can submit your book to, and I received a coveted Kirkus Star for Virginia Hamilton, which, as Arnold said, when who was one of the first that I shared the news with, he said, that's awesome. He said Virginia didn't even receive the Kirkus Star for all of her work. I mean, she received, you know, glowing reviews and stars, but not everything that she wrote received that Kirkus Star. And it also landed on Bank Street College has an annual publication that they highlight the best children's books in various genres and categories. and my biography is on that list with that outstanding merit extra little.
Congratulations.
So it was, again, validating, right? As writers, for sure. You just never know if what you're writing is going to, and as the nonfiction, I'm kind of that, I don't want, you know, everybody is all, and I see this even through our work with Claire's Day, where everybody loves fiction. Everybody, you know, there's a whole big push for fiction, but it's turning. There's picture book biographies are becoming a big thing in the world of and middle grade biographies. You know, we have Ohio University Press is their initial process was to feature Ohio authors or Ohioans of note, or those who had some connection to Ohio. They've, you know, expanded a bit beyond that, but as you know, we have some incredible talent. We have amazing individuals who have lived in Ohio, spent their lives, have created here in Ohio. And so it's awesome to be able to share those stories as opposed to another biography of someone who is very well known. So this is pulling the curtain back on characters that we might not know about.
Julie, you mentioned Claire's Day. I mean, I can't imagine anyone in our community that does not know about Claire's Day, but for those that may not or totally understand what it is, can you give us a kind of a thumbnail sketch of Claire's Day?
Sure. Claire's Day is an acronym actually for a celebration of life, authors, illustrators, and reading excellence. My husband Brad and I sadly lost our oldest daughter Claire 24 years ago. She was just 10.
Yes.
It was sudden, it was unexpected, and as her parents, as well as the parents of two other children who were just 8 and 6 at the time, we felt compelled to honor her in a way that was true to her. We also felt compelled to honor our relationship and our relationship with our other two children. So even though Claire's Day has been an amazing staple in the community for over 23 years now, I am most proud of that relationship with my husband and with our two other children, because you know, it could have really gone in the other direction. And so you know, both Brad and I just kept thinking, you know, she loved to read, and she not only loved to read, but she loved to encourage others to read. And amazingly, 6 months after she passed, we're on a flight to a family wedding in Jacksonville, and in my seat pocket is a Time magazine. And there was an article about former First Lady Laura Bush and the Texas Book Festival. And what really resonated with me is that Texas Book Festival initially featured Texas-born authors, illustrators, or those who wrote about Texas. And I thought, you know, every night that we would read to the kids, or when we'd read to the kids, as a writer at the time, background is marketing and sales, we go to that back flap and we learn about the authors and illustrators. I'm reading the story, and it was like an epiphany. I'm starting to bawl on the plane. You know, six months out, you could break at any time.
Right.
Hand the article to my husband. I said, this is what we're going to do. And Claire's Day was born from that moment. And let's see, that was January of 2001. May of 2002, we had our first Claire's Day. Claire's Day is everything that acronym states. We feature children's book authors and illustrators from Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, even beyond those borders sometimes, but primarily regionalized.
Yes.
We're not huge, you know, we have 10 to 12 children's book authors and illustrators at each event. We're now 2 events.
You get big crowds.
Yeah, we get big crowds.
And
not only big crowds, but we impact now over 25,000 children and families through our 2 festivals, as well as our authors and illustrators. We partner with 40 schools in the region that host our authors and illustrators. It's kind of like Claire's Day on the road. So maybe, you know, these kids wouldn't have the opportunity to come to Claire's Day. They'll have that author or illustrator experience in their schools. And, you know, just as I do with school visits, they share their journeys as an author, you know, who they were as young, you know, children, and where this passion for writing came from and what their process is, you know, how do they spend their days writing or illustrating. And one of the coolest aspects, though, of Claire's Day is that Brad, my husband, is dyslexic, and I'm very proud of him. He's worked very hard to overcome this learning challenge, and a lot of the children that we have at Claire's Day are similar, you know, have reading challenges. And from the outset, he said, you know, I would like to establish an awards program where we are honoring children like me, who these kids are, they're smart, but oftentimes we're in the back of the classroom because back in the day, there wasn't
when it wasn't diagnosed.
Correct, correct. Right, so we are honoring children who have been chosen by their schools as being the most improved readers in the schools. So these stories are just absolutely, oh my gosh, they touch my heart. They make me cry, they make me laugh, and I see and feel Claire there is, almost like that little angel just, hovering over the shoulder of that child, congratulating them for their hard work and moving forward in their reading journey.
You have to tell Steve and China and Corey and Stephen and our audience out there, you and your husband honoring your wonderful daughter Claire has been incredible in the community, but there's another, to me, a layer to that, and that is that parents who have lost children, you have been an inspiration to them. I don't know that there's any way to handle it, there's no way to handle it, but you have been an inspiration to allow people to move forward, try to honor that lost child, try to do something positive. And I love when you talk about, if you're aware, sometimes you'll get little signs. We tell the fact story to Steve. Tell him the story.
So very early on after Claire died, and I was kind of hit by a double whammy because I had, again, background was marketing and sales. I was director of sales at the Toledo Convention and Visitors Bureau, and then I was hired over to Seagate Center, and then we had 3 babies in 3.5 years, and my husband was building his business with his brother. So I was blessed to be able to step away from the career and be at home. But our youngest then went to first grade, was full-time in first grade. So I was home with a lot of time on my hand and trying to figure this new normal out. And so I would write emails to family about how we were doing through these very hard early days. And I wrote about how it was the little things that I missed about her, and it was just so, I missed like having Claire on my lap just after having taken a bath that night and snuggled together and reading and smelling that shampoo. And I just, as I'm writing it, I made myself cry, and I had to step away from the computer, went and got some tissues. When I came back, my printer was just off to the side and it was printing something. And I thought, that's very odd. I hadn't just turned on the printer and I hadn't printed this up. So out comes a sheet of paper and I look at it on the front and I don't see anything on the front. I thought, that's odd. I flipped it over to put it back in the tray. In the upper left-hand corner was this little heart. Like half a dozen times that happened.
And it was in Claire's color, she liked purple?
Wow.
In purple. I can't tell you the number of times over the years where little purple golf ball on a walk, a purple crayon when I'm getting into my car, just all things purple appear. Or just, experiences where I feel everybody has their own belief system, but I do believe that there is something more than this.
Sure.
And that her hand has come into play in my life in so many ways. So much of this is just circumstantial. I don't.
So if you're aware, you can see some of those signs, and I think there's comfort in those signs. Yes. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes.
Wow.
Fireflies the same. Fireflies have a special significance. So whenever you see a firefly, just think of our little Claire. Yeah.
What an amazing legacy for Claire with what you've done with Claire's Day, and obviously the impact she's had on all these other children. With you sharing your love of her love of reading and your love of reading. So it's amazing what you've done in our community. Thank you for all you've done. I have to ask, is there a project that you're working on currently? Is there something else upcoming?
So I'm doing something very different. I am venturing into the waters of fiction.
Okay.
And one of the things that we did as a family to move forward was literally move forward. We had intended to get all 3 of our children to all 50 states.
Yes.
And we had a camping trailer. We had some great camping experiences with all 3 kids. After we lost Claire, it took a couple of years. We were really, it's a hard journey, but we ended up buying a motorhome. And our first journey was 3 weeks in 2003. And I journaled, and I insisted our kids reflect on these journeys in some form, whether
Right.
they, did a scrapbook or they did a
Sure.
photo album or actually wrote a journal. And so I'm writing kind of a fictionalized version of that first trip. And, because it really was at the end of those 3 weeks, both Brad said it best. He coined the phrase. He said, we both found our souls again. And I think that's...
It'd be a great title.
Yeah.
I found my soul. We
Yeah.
found our soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So middle grade. So middle grade written from this 10-year-old male protagonist who's journaled, and he's a Trekkie fan, and there's Lewis and Clark, and it's fun. It's a very fun project.
I can't wait to read it. I did a trip out west after college with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we talk about it to this day. And I think it's something that every family should do, is experience that type of adventure together. So,
We have an amazing country, so much to learn, and we did meet that goal. Got the kids to all 50 states. 3 of them not in a motorhome, but all 50 states, and now Brad and I are hitching up the wagon again, and we're spending quite a bit of time revisiting a lot of them, so it's awesome.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in today. It's
Thank you.
Great to learn about some of the folks you've written about, more about you. And if people want to know more about you or find out more about Claire's Day, how can they do it?
Claire's Day website is clairesday.org, and that is CLAIRESDAY.org, or my website is julierubini.com, and there's links to either one.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Steve Taylor's Community Star. We'll see you next time. Have a good one, everyone.